The sun was not a celestial body. It was a verdict. It hung suspended in the center of the Arizona sky, a white-hot coin punched into a canvas the color of bleached bone. It did not shine so much as it hammered, striking the anvil of the earth with a relentless, silent rhythm that turned the very air into a physical weight. The heat was oppressive, a heavy woolen blanket soaked in boiling water and draped over the world, pressing down until the horizon blurred into a shimmering, liquid mirage where sanity went to die. Silas Thorne felt the heat in the marrow of his bones. It was a dull ache that started in his heels and radiated up his spine, settling at the base of his skull like a clenched fist. He walked. He did not stumble, for stumbling was a luxury of the hopeful, and Silas had left hope 3 towns back in New Mexico. He moved with the mechanical, grinding precision of a machine that had forgotten the purpose of its movement but retained the memory of its function. His duster, once a deep charcoal, was now the color of dried blood and alkali dust, stiff with sweat and grime. It hung off his gaunt frame like the skin of a shed reptile. The brim of his hat was pulled low, casting a slash of shadow over eyes that were the color of flint, hard, gray, and capable of sparking fire, though currently they held only the dull reflection of the endless road. The only sound in the vast emptiness was the crunch of boot leather on gravel, a sound like breaking fingers, and the dragging shuffle behind him. "Silas," a voice croaked. It wasn't a call. It was a sound like dry leaves crumbling in a fist. A gasp of air forced through a throat coated in dust. Silas stopped. He didn't turn immediately. He took a moment to center himself, to push down the fatigue that clawed at the back of his knees. He inhaled the air, which smelled of creosote and heated stone, and slowly pivoted on his heel. Leo stood 10 paces back. The reins of the roan mare looped loosely around his small, sun-blistered hand. The boy was 13, but the desert had stripped the softness from his face, leaving the sharp angles of cheekbones and a jawline that mimicked the harsh geography around them. His hair, the color of dirty straw, plastered to his forehead in wet strands. His lips were cracked, bleeding slightly at the corners. "She's stopping," Leo gasped, leaning his weight against the horse's shoulder. The animal's head hung low, foam dripping from her muzzle onto the cracked earth in thick, white ropes. Her breathing was a wet, rattling sound like a bellows full of sand. Her coat, usually a vibrant red roan, was matted with sweat and dust, turning her the color of a bruise. "She isn't stopping, Leo," Silas said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to come from the cracked earth itself. "She's failing." "We can rest," Leo pleaded, his blue eyes wide and terrifyingly bright against the dirt on his face. He looked at Silas with a desperation that cut deeper than the sun. "Just for a minute. There's a shadow by that rock. If we let her cool down." Silas looked at the rock Leo pointed to, a jagged tooth of sandstone jutting out of the hardpan. It offered perhaps 6 inches of shade, barely enough for a lizard, let alone a horse and 2 humans. He looked at the water skin slung over his own shoulder. It bumped against his hip terrifyingly light. Maybe a pint left, maybe less. "If we stop, we don't start again," Silas said, the words tasting like ash. "Blind Creek is 10 miles. We push." "She can't push," Leo yelled, a sudden burst of defiance cracking through his exhaustion. "Look at her legs, Silas. Look at it." Silas looked. He had been avoiding it for the last hour, forcing his gaze to the horizon, but he looked now. The mare's front right fetlock was swollen to the size of a melon. She wasn't putting weight on it. She was dragging it. Every step was a torture, a grinding of bone against bone that sent shudders through her flank. "She stepped in a hole," Leo whispered, tears cutting clean tracks through the dust on his cheeks. "Miles back. I tried to pull her up, but I tried to tell you." "I know, sie das Lied." He hadn't known. He had been too lost in his own head, too busy counting the ghosts that walked beside him, too busy replaying the tape of his own failures to notice the animal's gait change. He was a scout, a tracker, a man who noticed bent grass from 50 yards away, yet he hadn't noticed the creature carrying their lives was dying. Silas walked over to the horse. He ran a hand down her neck. She shivered under his touch, her skin hot and dry like parchment paper. He knelt in the dirt, ignoring the sting of the gravel, and felt the leg. The heat radiating from the injury was intense. The bone wasn't just bruised. The grinding sensation under his fingers, the crepitus, told him it was shattered. A compound fracture waiting to break the skin. He stood up. The silence of the desert rushed in, filling the space between them. A hawk circled high above, a black speck waiting for the inevitable. It was the only other living thing for miles. "Unbuckle the saddlebags," Silas commanded. Leo froze. His hand tightened on the reins. "What? Take the water. Take the beans. Leave the rest." "We can't leave the saddle," Leo said, his voice rising in pitch, teetering on the edge of hysteria. "It's worth money. And she needs it. When she gets better, we'll need it." "Leo." Silas said the name gently, which was worse than if he had shouted. He stepped closer, his shadow engulfing the boy. "She isn't getting better." The boy understood then. The denial shattered like glass. He stepped back, placing his small body between Silas and the horse, spreading his arms like a shield. "No," Leo whispered. "No. You fix things. I can't fix this." "You told me," Leo screamed. "You told me about the war. About the caisson horse at Shiloh. You said my father fixed its leg with a splint, and it pulled the cannon another 5 miles. You said he was a miracle worker. You said he saved it." Silas felt a sharp pain in his chest, a phantom bayonet twist. The lie. The beautiful, architectural lie he had built for the boy over 2 years. A cathedral of falsehoods constructed to keep James Ward a hero and Silas Thorne savior. He remembered the horse at Shiloh. James hadn't fixed it. James had shot it while weeping, his hands shaking so hard he missed the first time. "Your father," Silas said, his voice straining, "had a medical wagon. He had supplies. He had time. We have time. We have a 10-mile walk and a pint of water," Silas snapped. "We are dying, Leo. Right now, standing here arguing, we are dying." "I'll carry the saddle," Leo screamed, desperation making him frantic. "I won't drink anymore. I promise. I'll walk all night. Just don't. Please, Silas. Don't hurt her." The mare let out a low groan and buckled. She went down hard, dust billowing up around her in a suffocating cloud. She didn't try to rise. She just lay there, her side heaving, looking at Silas with a large, dark eye. There was no judgment in that eye, only a profound, exhausted question. "How much longer?" Silas reached down to his hip. The leather of his holster was worn smooth by years of friction. He drew the Colt Peacemaker. The metal was heavy. It always felt heavier when he wasn't fighting for his life, but for his mercy. "Get up, Leo. I hate you." Leo sobbed, turning his back and covering his ears with his hands. He hunched his shoulders, making himself small against the violence of the world. "I hate you. You just want to kill her because it's easy. Because you're tired." "Nothing about this is easy," Silas whispered to the wind. He walked to the horse's head. He knelt on one knee. He placed a hand on her nose, stroking the velvet softness. She exhaled a long, dusty breath against his palm. "Easy passage, girl," he murmured. He cocked the hammer. Click-clack. The sound was crisp, mechanical, perfect. It was the sound of a period being placed at the end of a sentence. He aimed at the spot just behind the mare's ear. And then the tremor came. It started deep in the nerves of his forearm, a revolt of the flesh against the will. His hand shook. The barrel wavered, dancing in the air like a dowsing rod searching for water. For a split second, the red fur of the horse dissolved. The heat of the Arizona sun vanished, replaced by the damp chill of a Tennessee morning. He wasn't looking at a horse. He was looking at a man in a blue uniform, lying in the mud. James Ward, his best friend, gut shot, the intestines visible, the smell of bile and blood. James was screaming, but not with words, just a high, keening sound of pure agony. "Do it, Silas. Be a friend. Do it." Silas gritted his teeth, the muscles in his jaw bunching. He grabbed his right wrist with his left hand, clamping down with a bruising grip. He forced the gun steady. He forced the ghost of James Ward back into the darkness of his mind, locking him behind the door of memory. He exhaled long and slow. Bang! The shot was not a sound. It was a physical blow to the atmosphere. It rolled across the basin, a singular, final note that echoed off the mesas, returning to them as a ghostly applause. The mare jerked once, a violent spasm that ran from nose to tail, and then settled into the earth. The tension left her body. The suffering was gone. Silas holstered the gun. The smoke drifted up, stinging his eyes. His hand was still trembling. He looked at Leo. The boy hadn't moved. He was shaking, vibrating with the aftershocks of the violence. He didn't turn around. Silas didn't offer comfort. He couldn't. Comfort was a luxury for people with water. Comfort was a lie, and he had told enough lies. Grab the canteen, Silas said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. Blind Creek isn't getting any closer. Leo turned slowly. His face was a mask of dust and grief, streaked with mud where the tears had fallen. But his eyes were old. They looked at Silas not with the adoration of a ward, but with the cold assessment of a stranger. You didn't even say goodbye, Leo whispered. Goodbye is for people who leave, Leo, Silas said, turning north, facing the shimmering heat. She didn't leave. She just stopped. The walk was a descent into hell. Without the horse, the landscape seemed to expand, growing larger and more hostile. The ground was not flat. It was a torture of dried ruts, sharp stones, and sudden dips that jarred the spine. The sun moved across the sky with agonizing slowness, shifting the shadows but never lessening the heat. They walked in silence, a silence that was heavier than the saddlebags Silas carried. It was a silence built of resentment. Silas could feel Leo's anger radiating off him like heat waves. The boy refused to walk beside him, lagging 5 paces behind, dragging his feet in a sullen rhythm. By the time the structures of Blind Creek appeared on the horizon, the sun was beginning to dip, turning the sky a bruised purple. Blind Creek was a dying gasp. It sat on the edge of a dry riverbed, a deep, jagged gash in the earth where water might have flowed 1,000 years ago, now choked with tumbleweeds, gray sagebrush, and the rusted skeletons of abandoned mining equipment. The town itself was a collection of bleached wood buildings that leaned into the wind, huddled together as if afraid of the emptiness surrounding them. There was no movement on the main street. Even the shadows seemed too exhausted to stretch. A sign creaked on a rusty hinge above a doorway, the Last Drop Saloon. The paint was peeling, curling up like dead skin. Silas and Leo walked into town like specters. Their boots kicked up small puffs of alkali dust that hung in the still air, marking their passage. "Is there water here?" Leo asked. His voice was gone, replaced by a painful, whistling wheeze. His lips were white. "There's whiskey," Silas said, scanning the rooftops for movement, for a rifle barrel, for a threat. "And where there's whiskey, there's water." They pushed through the swinging doors of the saloon. The transition from the blinding white sun to the dim interior made Silas blind for a moment. He paused in the doorway, his hand hovering instinctively near his hip, letting his pupils dilate. He presented a silhouette to anyone inside, a dangerous invitation. The smell hit him first, a thick, stagnant soup. It smelled of sawdust soaked in stale beer, unwashed bodies, cheap tobacco, and the underlying metallic tang of despair. As his vision cleared, he saw the room. It was cavernous and mostly empty. A few miners slumped over tables, looking more like piles of rags than men. They didn't look up. A piano player sat a silent upright, head resting on the keys, asleep or dead drunk. Silas guided Leo to a corner table, putting his back to the wall. It was a habit he couldn't break, a relic of the war. He sat down, the wood of the chair groaning under his weight. He felt the vibration of the floorboards, the emptiness of the place. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his coins. He counted them by touch, not wanting to show them to the room. $3, maybe 3.5. The price of a life. A barkeep approached. He was a man shaped like a barrel, with a stained apron that mapped the history of his week's meals. His eyes were small, buried in flesh, and held the indifferent glaze of a man who had seen every variation of human failure. "Whiskey," Silas said, his voice raspy. And a bowl of stew for the boy. And a pitcher of water. Water's 2 bits, the barkeep grunted, wiping a rag across the already dirty table. Good water. From the deep well. Not that alkali poison. Robbery, Silas muttered. Supply and demand, friend. The creek's dry. The sky's dry. You want wet, you pay. Silas slid a silver dollar across the table. It spun and settled. The barkeep snatched it up with the speed of a lizard striking a fly. When the water came, Leo drank with a desperation that was painful to watch. He spilled it down his chin, his hands shaking so hard the pitcher rattled against the glass. He gulped, choking, gasping, and drinking again. Silas took a sip of the whiskey. It tasted like kerosene and fire, burning a path down his throat, cauterizing the dust. He welcomed the burn. It distracted him from the tremor in his hand, which had returned the moment he sat down. You have the look of a man who's lost something. A voice drifted from the shadows of the adjacent booth. Silas didn't turn his head. He watched the reflection in his dirty glass. He saw a shape in the darkness. And you have the look of a man who talks too much. A dry chuckle. It sounded like boots on gravel. Fair enough. A figure emerged from the gloom. He was older, perhaps 50, but aged into 60 by the bottle. He wore a suit that had once been fine linen, cream-colored, now yellowed with sweat and frayed at the cuffs. A silk cravat hung loosely around his neck, stained with wine. His face was a map of broken capillaries, red and blotchy, but his eyes were sharp, blue and piercing, swimming in a sea of bloodshot white. They were the eyes of a man who was drowning but still trying to sell you the water. Elias Vance, the man said, sliding into the chair opposite Silas without invitation. He placed a bottle of gin on the table. His hand shook violently, a palsy that made the glass chink against the wood. Clink, clink, clink. Silas ignored the extended hand. Silas Thorne. Thorne. Elias tested the name, rolling it around his mouth like wine. A sharp name. Prickly. You traveled the basin on foot. Horse broke a leg 10 miles back. A mercy killing, then. Elias nodded, pouring himself a drink. He spilled a little on the table. I saw the dust from the window. I admire a man who can do the hard thing. The necessary thing. Leo stopped eating. He lowered his spoon, staring at Elias with a mixture of fear and fascination. The stranger smelled of expensive cologne masking the rot of gin. What do you want? Silas asked, his voice low and dangerous. He didn't like being watched. I need a man. Elias leaned in, his breath sour. Not a ranch hand. I have those. Useless, lazy sods who would sell their mothers for a pouch of tobacco. I need a custodian. I'm not a janitor. No. Elias waved a hand dismissively. For my daughter, Elara. Silas raised an eyebrow. You want me to babysit a child? Elias's face darkened. A shadow passed over his features. A complex mix of shame, fear, and resentment. He took a long pull of gin, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. She is no child, Mr. Thorne. She is 28, and she is unwell. Unwell how? The desert fever, Elias whispered, glancing around the empty saloon as if the walls were listening. It took her mind years ago. She is wild, unpredictable. She sees things that aren't there. She hears voices in the wind. She builds traps. Put her in an asylum, Silas said, coldness. I can't, Elias hissed. Harlan Graves, do you know the name? Silas nodded slowly. The railroad baron. I saw his tracks crossing the border. They say he eats towns. He wants my ranch, Elias said, his voice dropping to a tremble. He's squeezing me, cutting off supplies, threatening my men. He says he wants the land for a spur line. But I can't sell. Not yet. Why not? Because the deed is in her mother's name, Elias said, looking down at his shaking hands. It passed to Elara when my wife died. Territorial law. I can't sell without her signature. And she refuses to sign. She thinks the land talks to her. She thinks she's protecting it. Elias looked up, his eyes pleading. I need a man to watch her. To keep her inside. To keep her from shooting the next man Graves sends to parley. If you can keep her under control long enough for me to persuade her or declare her incompetent, I will give you $500. Silas froze. The glass stopped halfway to his mouth. $500. That was a new life. That was a ticket east. That was a military school for Leo, a place with uniforms and discipline and honor. Things Silas couldn't give him. It was a way to pay the debt he owed to James Ward. He looked at Leo. The boy's clothes were rags. His ribs showed through his shirt. He was eating the stew like a starving dog. "You want me to be a jailer?" Silas said. "I want you to be a protector," Elias corrected, though the word sounded hollow, rotting in the air between them. $50 a month in advance. Room and board. And a horse for the boy. Silas looked at the gin bottle. He looked at the trembling hands of the man before him. He saw a coward. A man who was selling his own daughter because he was too weak to fight the sharks circling his boat. But Silas wasn't in a position to judge cowards. He was just a man who carried a lie. "Done," Silas said. "But the boy stays with me. And I don't hurt women." "You won't have to hurt her." Elias stood up, unsteady on his feet. He dropped a heavy pouch of coins on the table. "You just have to stop her from hurting us. But be warned, Mr. Thorne. The Vance Ranch is not a happy place. The ghosts there, they don't just rattle chains. They scream." The ride to the ranch was a descent into isolation. Elias had secured 2 horses from the livery stable, charging them to a tab that the stable master accepted with a roll of his eyes and a spit of tobacco. They rode north, following the scar of the dry creek bed into the throat of the canyon. The landscape changed. The flat, open basin gave way to towering walls of red rock, striated with layers of time. The wind picked up, funneling through the narrow passage with a sound like a low moan, a constant, mournful note that grated on the nerves. The sun began to set, painting the canyon walls in violent shades of purple and bruised black. The Vance Ranch appeared around a bend like a fortress besieged by nature. It was nestled tight against the sheer cliff face, utilizing the rock wall as its rear defense. The main house was a sprawling structure of timber and adobe, gray and weathered, looking as if it had grown out of the stone itself. The windows were shuttered tight, heavy wooden slats barring any light from entering or escaping. The fences were high, reinforced not just with wood, but with coils of barbed wire that gleamed viciously in the fading light. It didn't look like a ranch meant to keep cattle in. It looked like a prison meant to keep something out. Or in. There were no cattle, no chickens scratching in the yard, no signs of life, just the wind and the dust swirling in small cyclones near the porch. "The bunkhouse is there." Elias pointed to a dilapidated shed near the corral. "You can stable the horses." "Where is she?" Silas asked, looking at the main house. It loomed over them, silent and foreboding. "In the east wing," Elias muttered. He looked at the house with genuine fear, his hand going to the flask in his pocket. "I'll show you to your room. But stay away from her door tonight. She's worse at night. The moon excites her." They entered the house. It was a mausoleum. Dust motes danced in the shafts of dying light that pierced the cracks in the shutters. The furniture was covered in white sheets, looking like phantoms frozen in conversation. The air inside was cool, but it smelled stagnant, like old paper, dried lavender, and something metallic like ozone. Elias led them down a long hallway, his boots echoing on the hardwood. They passed a heavy oak door reinforced with iron bands. A sliding bolt, the kind used on prison cells, thick as a man's wrist, was mounted on the outside. Silas stopped. He stared at the bolt. "Is she in there?" "She's always in there." Elias took a swig from his hip flask, his eyes darting away. "Or in the cellar. Do not open this door, Mr. Thorne. Not until morning. I will introduce you when she is lucid." Elias retreated to his study, the sound of a cork popping echoing down the hall like a gunshot. Silas took Leo to a guest room. It was sparse but clean. A bed, a wash basin, a window looking out at the canyon wall. "Lock the door from the inside," Silas told the boy. He checked the window latch. He checked under the bed. Old habits from the war. "Is she a monster?" Leo asked, sitting on the edge of the bed, clutching his knees. He looked small in the room. "The crazy lady? Fear makes monsters out of people, Leo. She's probably just scared." Silas placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. He felt the tension in Leo's muscles, the lingering anger. "Get some sleep. We have work tomorrow." "Silas." "Yeah." "You didn't say a prayer for the horse." Silas paused in the doorway. The shadow of the hallway cut across his face. God doesn't live out here, Leo. If he did, he moved on a long time ago. He closed the door. He didn't go to his room. He couldn't sleep. The house felt alive. It hummed with a tension he could feel on his skin. It wasn't the creaking of wood. It was the vibration of a held breath. He walked back to the heavy oak door. The east wing. He listened. Silence. Absolute, heavy silence. Mad as a hatter, Elias had said. Dangerous. Silas looked at the bolt. A father locking his daughter away like an animal. It twisted something in Silas's gut. He had killed a horse to end its suffering. What kind of suffering was behind this door? Was she chained? Was she starving? He reached out. His hand brushed the cold iron. He slid the bolt back. It moved with a well-oiled smoothness that surprised him. There was no rust. Someone had been maintaining this lock, ensuring it worked perfectly, or ensuring it opened silently. He turned the handle and stepped inside. The room was pitch black. The air was significantly cooler here, and the smell changed. The stagnant dust smell was gone, replaced by the sharp, biting scent of gun oil, ozone, and fresh sawdust. Alara, Silas called out softly. He took a step forward into the darkness. A floorboard creaked under his boot, a deliberate, loud groan that seemed amplified by the room's acoustics. Click! The sound came from everywhere and nowhere. It was the distinct sound of a mechanism engaging, a spring releasing tension. Before Silas could react, the floor beneath his right foot gave way. Not a hole, but a pressure plate. A rope snapped tight around his ankle. He was yanked upward with violent force. The world spun. He was hoisted 3 feet into the air, dangling upside down like a slaughtered hog. His Colt slid from his holster and clattered to the floor, sliding across the wood out of reach. Blood rushed to his head. He swung gently in the darkness, disorientation washing over him. A match flared. The sudden light was blinding. Through the dizziness, Silas saw a figure emerge from the shadows. She held a kerosene lamp in one hand and a disassembled Winchester rifle receiver in the other. Alara Vance was not the crone Elias had described. She was not a frazzled, screaming madwoman. She was tall, wearing men's trousers and a white shirt stained with grease, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. Her black hair was pulled back severely, but loose strands fell across a face that was striking. Not for its beauty, though she was beautiful in a severe architectural way, but for its sharpness. Her eyes were dark, intelligent, and burning with a cold, analytical fury. She walked over to him, leaning in close. The lamp illuminated her face from below, casting long shadows that made her look like a demon. "Gravity," she said. Her voice was husky, calm, and absolutely lethal. "It's the only law men like you can't break." "Elias said you were mad," Silas grunted, reaching for his boot knife. "Don't," she said, placing the hot glass of the lamp perilously close to his face. "The rope is wire-reinforced hemp. You'll dull your blade. And Elias is a drunk who sees demons in the bottom of a bottle." She set the lamp down on a workbench. Silas twisted his body to look. The room wasn't a padded cell. It was a workshop. Diagrams of steam engines covered the walls. Half-built contraptions littered the floor, gears, pressure valves, clockwork detonators, tripwires. "So," she said, picking up a rag to wipe the grease from her fingers, "you're the new keeper. Or did he hire you to be my husband? He's been threatening to buy me a husband for months. Said I needed a strong hand." "I'm the guard," Silas said, feeling the humiliation burn his cheeks. "Cut me down." "Guard," she laughed. It was a sharp, jagged sound, devoid of humor. "Who are you guarding, Mr. Thorne? Me from the world? Or the world from me?" She picked up a knife from the table. A Bowie knife with a 12-inch blade. She walked toward him. Silas tensed, preparing to fight, dangling or not. She slashed the rope with a single, fluid motion. Silas hit the floor hard, tucking his shoulder to roll. He sprang to his feet, crouched, ready to strike. She hadn't moved. She was just watching him, twirling the knife. "If I wanted you dead, you'd be cooling on the floorboards already," she said. "That trap was set for a grizzly bear or Harlan Graves. You just happened to be the one walking in." Silas stood up slowly, dusting himself off. He retrieved his Colt from the floor, holstering it. He looked at her with new eyes. "You're an engineer," Silas said, looking at the diagrams. "I'm a survivor," she corrected. "My father thinks I'm building toys. He doesn't look closely enough. He's too busy selling pieces of his soul to Graves." She walked closer to him, invading his personal space. She smelled of iron and work and sweat. It was the smell of competence. "Why are you here, Silas Thorne? You have the eyes of a killer, but the hands of a man who regrets it. I saw you flinch when the rope took you. You hesitated." "I need the money," Silas said flatly. "I have a boy to feed." "A boy?" Her expression softened, just a fraction. "You brought a child into this house? Into a war zone?" Elias said he wants to sell the land. "He needs you to sign. He hired me to keep you safe until you do." "Safe?" Alara scoffed. She walked to the center of the room. A large Persian rug lay there. She kicked it aside. Beneath was not wood, but a heavy iron trapdoor set into the rock foundation of the house. "Come here," she ordered. Silas hesitated, then walked over. "Open it." He bent down and heaved the door open. It was heavy, solid iron. A blast of cold, damp air hit his face. He shone the lamp down. He expected a cellar, a dungeon, gold bars. He saw a cavern, a natural fissure in the rock, extending deep into the earth. And inside, illuminated by the flickering light, were bones. Dozens of them, neatly arranged in niches carved into the stone walls. In the center, a fresh marker made of polished red stone caught the light. Isabella Vance, 1835 to 1878. "My mother," Alara whispered, "and her ancestors. The Apache who lived here before the Spanish, before the Americans. They trusted my mother's family to guard this place." "It's a crypt," Silas said. "It's a reservoir," Alara corrected. "Listen." Silas listened. Faintly, deep below the bones, he heard it. The rhythmic, soothing rush of water. "The blind creek isn't dry, Silas. It went underground. This aquifer feeds the entire valley. Graves doesn't want the land for a railroad. The grade is too steep. It would cost a fortune. He wants the water. He plans to use dynamite to blast the cliff face, divert the flow to his processing plants in the south." She looked at him, her eyes fierce. "If he blasts the cliff, he destroys this cave. He washes my mother's bones into the mud. He erases us." She grabbed his arm. Her grip was strong, desperate. "My father knows this. He sold my mother out years ago to save his own skin, and now he's selling her bones. He calls me crazy because the truth is too heavy for a coward to carry." She stepped back, picking up a wrench from the table. She weighed it in her hand. "You have a choice, Silas Thorne. You can be my jailer. You can drug me, bind me, and force my hand to the paper. You'll get your $500. She pointed to the trapdoor. "Or you can help me. You can help me turn this ranch into a weapon. We can hold Graves off. We can save the water." Silas looked at the trapdoor. He thought of the horse in the desert. He thought of Leo sleeping in the other room, believing the world was full of heroes. He thought of the tremor in his hand that only went away when he was doing something necessary. "I don't fight for free," Silas said quietly. "There's gold." Alara lied, or maybe she didn't. Her eyes dared him to call her bluff. "Buried deeper. If we win, I'll give you enough to send the boy to a real school, far away from guns." Silas looked at the woman who stood before him. Not a damsel, not a lunatic, but a soldier defending a sacred post. "Show me the perimeter," Silas said. "If Graves is coming, that wire fence out front won't stop a stiff breeze." Alara smiled. It was a terrifying, beautiful smile. It was the smile of someone who had been fighting alone for a long time and finally found someone to pass the ammunition. "Follow me," she said, "and watch your step. The hallway is rigged with black powder." Time in the canyon did not flow like water. It dripped like molasses, slow, heavy, and sweet with the scent of decay. 3 weeks had passed since Silas Thorne had walked through the iron-reinforced door of the East Wing. 3 weeks of labor that broke the body to quiet the mind. The Vance Ranch was changing. To the untrained eye, to Elias, who watched from the porch through the bottom of a gin bottle, it looked like a junkyard. Piles of scrap metal, coiled copper tubing, and dismantled steam boilers cluttered the yard. But Silas saw the pattern. He saw the kill zones. He was kneeling in the dust near the main gate, digging a trench. His shirt was soaked through, clinging to his back like a second skin. His hands, blistered and calloused, worked the shovel with a rhythm that was almost hypnotic. Dig, lift, throw, dig, lift, throw. Deeper, a voice said from above. Silas looked up, squinting against the glare. Alara stood on the porch roof, wearing her welding goggles pushed up on her forehead. She held a surveyor's transit in one hand. If it's any deeper, we'll hit hell, Silas grunted, wiping sweat from his eyes with a dirty forearm. Graves won't send foot soldiers first, Alara called down, her voice carrying over the wind. He'll send horses, heavy cavalry. If that trench isn't 3 feet deep, they'll clear it. I need them to stumble. I need them to slow down so the steam vents can catch them. Silas rested on the shovel. He looked at the woman on the roof. In 3 weeks, they had barely spoken of anything other than angles, pressure per square inch, and line of sight. It was a courtship of ballistics and engineering. You think like a general, Silas said. I think like prey that decided to stop running, she replied. She adjusted the transit. Checking the north ridge. I saw a reflection up there this morning. Binoculars. We're being watched. Silas climbed out of the trench. He walked to the water barrel and ladled a cup over his head. The water was cool, drawn from the secret aquifer beneath the house. It felt like a baptism. He looked over at the corral. Leo was there, sitting on the fence rail, throwing rocks at a fence post. Thwack, thwack, thwack. The boy was alone. He was always alone now. Silas felt a pang of guilt, sharp as a rib fracture. He had been so consumed with fortifying the ranch, so consumed with Alara's war, that he had left Leo to drift. He's lonely, Alara said. She had climbed down the ladder silently, appearing beside him like a ghost in mechanic's coveralls. Silas startled slightly. He's bored. Boredom is better than dead. Is it? Alara picked up a wrench from a crate. She turned it over in her hands, her fingers stained with grease. He watches you, Silas. When you're showing me how to load the Winchester. When we're mapping the grid. He looks like a dog left out in the rain. I'm keeping him out of the line of fire. He's a boy. He shouldn't know how to build a kill box. He's not a boy. Alara looked at the corral. Not anymore. The desert took that from him the day you shot his horse. She turned her dark eyes to Silas. They were uncomfortably perceptive. You're afraid of him, she stated. It wasn't a question. Silas stiffened. I'm afraid for him. No, you're afraid of what he sees when he looks at you. You're afraid he'll see the truth you're hiding. Silas dropped the ladle back into the barrel. The splash sounded angry. We have work to do, Miss Vance. Alara didn't push. She never pushed. She just laid the truth out like a blueprint and let him decide whether to build it or ignore it. Tonight, she said, walking back toward the workshop. I need help calibrating the main pressure valve in the cellar. My hands, they aren't strong enough to turn the rusted wheel. I'll be there, Silas said. He watched her walk away. He looked back at Leo. The boy had stopped throwing rocks. He was staring at the horizon, where the heat shimmered like a curtain hiding a stage. Silas took a step toward the boy, intending to say something, anything. Good throw. Keep your head down. I'm doing this for you. But the words died in his throat. The lie he carried, the truth about James Ward, sat heavy on his tongue, choking him. He turned back to the trench and kept digging. The perimeter of the Vance Ranch was marked by a rotting cedar fence that marked the boundary between ours and theirs. Beyond that fence lay the open range, a sea of sagebrush that belonged to no one and everyone. Leo sat on a large boulder just inside the fence line. The sun beat down on his straw hat. He had a knife in his hand, an old, rusty thing he had found in the barn, and he was whittling a piece of driftwood, shaving off curl after curl of gray wood. He was angry. It was a hot, simmering anger that sat in his stomach like a stone. Silas was always with her, the crazy lady, the mechanic. They spoke in a language of nods and gestures that Leo didn't understand. He was the baggage, the burden. That's a dull blade, son. The voice was smooth, like oil pouring over velvet. Leo jumped, dropping the wood. He looked up. A man sat on a magnificent black stallion on the other side of the fence. The horse's coat shone like polished obsidian, devoid of dust. The man was dressed in a suit of dark gray wool, cut to perfection. A silver watch chain glinted on his vest. His hat was pristine. It was Harlan Graves. Leo knew who he was. Silas had pointed him out once, a black speck on a distant ridge. The devil, Silas had called him. But this man didn't look like a devil. He looked like a king. "I'm not your son," Leo said, retrieving his knife. He tried to sound tough like Silas. "No," Graves smiled. It was a warm smile, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "You're Silas Thorne's boy. I see the resemblance. The same stubborn jaw." "I'm not his boy, either," Leo muttered, more to himself than the stranger. "I'm just with him." Graves nodded, as if this made perfect sense. He dismounted gracefully, his boots hitting the ground with a solid thump. He walked to the fence, resting gloved hands on the rail. He didn't cross it. He respected the line. "A man without a tribe," Graves said. "That's a hard way to live, especially out here." He looked at the knife in Leo's hand. "You try and sharpen a stick with a spoon, Leo? May I call you Leo?" Leo didn't answer, but he didn't say no. Graves reached into his saddlebag. He moved slowly, deliberately showing he was no threat. He pulled out an object wrapped in oilcloth. He unwrapped it on the fence post. It was a revolver, but not just a gun. It was a piece of art. The barrel was blued steel, deep and lustrous. The cylinder was engraved with scrolling vines. The handle was carved from genuine ivory, yellowed with age and smooth as glass. "Colt Navy," Graves said softly, converted from metallic cartridges. Balanced perfectly, Leo stared at it. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. It looked like power. "Silas says I'm too young for handguns," Leo whispered. "He says they make you careless." "Silas Thorne is a cautious man," Graves said. "And caution keeps you alive. But it doesn't make you a man. A man protects what is his. How can you protect yourself with a whittling knife?" Graves picked up the gun. He held it by the barrel, offering the grip to Leo. "Try it. It's not loaded." Leo hesitated. He looked back toward the ranch house. It was a quarter-mile away. Silas was in a trench. Alara was on the roof. Neither was looking at him. Leo reached out. His hand passed through the invisible barrier of the fence line. He grasped the ivory handle. It was heavy, but it felt right. It felt like an extension of his arm. He raised it, aiming at a cactus. "Good stance," Graves observed. "Natural eye. Your father. James. He was a marksman, wasn't he?" Leo lowered the gun, looking at Graves in surprise. "You knew my father?" Graves' expression shifted to one of somber respect. "I fought in the same regiment, the 12th Tennessee. I was a major. James Ward was one of the finest sergeants I ever commanded. Brave, loyal." Graves paused, watching Leo closely. "He didn't die running, Leo, no matter what stories you've been told." Leo felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. "Silas said he died charging the line. A hero. Is that what he said?" Graves sighed, a sound of heavy regret. Silas has a way of painting history in colors that suit him. He protects people from the truth. He thinks he's being kind. What truth?" Leo gripped the gun tighter. Graves reached out and gently closed his hand over the barrel of the gun Leo was holding. "Keep it," Graves said. "I can't. Silas will." "Hide it," Graves whispered. "A secret between men. A tool for when you're ready to hear the rest of the story. Because a man deserves to know how his father really died. Don't you agree?" Leo looked at the gun. Then he looked at the ranch house, the fortress where he was treated like a child, kept in the dark. "Yes," Leo said. "Good." Graves mounted his horse. "I'll be back, Leo, when you're ready to ask the right questions." He rode away, leaving a cloud of dust, and a boy holding a weapon that felt like the key to a locked door. Night in the canyon was absolute. The cliff walls blocked the moon, leaving the ranch in a pool of ink-black darkness, illuminated only by the stars that burned fiercely overhead. Inside the main house, the air was still. Silas sat in a wooden chair in the center of the kitchen. He had stripped off his shirt. His body was a map of scars, bullet grazes, knife slashes, the mottled burn on his shoulder from a black powder mishap years ago. On the table beside him sat a basin of hot water, a bar of soap, and a straight razor. Alara sat opposite him, cleaning the mechanisms of a pressure gauge. The smell of gun oil mixed with the steam rising from the basin. It was a domestic scene, but sharpened by the context of their lives. Silas lathered his face. The soap was rough, smelling of lye. He picked up the razor. He looked at his hand in the reflection of the dark window. It was shaking, a fine, high-frequency tremor. He tried to bring the blade to his jaw. The steel chattered against the air. He lowered it, frustration tightening his jaw. "Let me," Alara said. Silas looked up. She hadn't looked up from her work, but she knew. She always knew. "I can do it," Silas muttered. "You'll cut your throat." Alara stood up. She wiped her hands on a rag. She walked over to him. "And I need you bleeding on the outside of the fence, not the kitchen floor." She took the razor from his hand. Her fingers were cool, calloused, and perfectly steady. She stepped between his legs. The proximity was sudden and overwhelming. Silas could smell her, sweat, lavender, and iron. He could feel the heat radiating from her body. She placed a hand on his forehead, tilting his head back. "Don't move," she whispered. She applied the blade to his throat. Scritch. The sound was loud in the quiet room. She moved with confident, fluid strokes. Silas closed his eyes. To have a blade this close to his jugular, held by a woman who built bombs for fun. It required a surrender he wasn't used to. "Why do you stay?" Alara asked softly. The blade moved up his cheek. "I signed a contract. Contracts are paper. You could leave tonight. Take the boy. Ride south. Graves wouldn't stop you. He wants the water, not you." Silas didn't answer immediately. He felt the razor glide over his chin. "I ran once," Silas said, his voice rumbling in his chest against her hand. "After the war. I thought if I moved fast enough, the ghosts couldn't keep up." "Did it work?" "No. They ride faster." Silas opened his eyes. He looked up at her. She was looking down at him with an expression that was unguarded, raw. "I stay because you're building something here. Not just traps. You're building a stand. A line in the sand. I'm tired of running, Alara." Alara stopped. The razor hovered near his lip. "I'm scared," she admitted. The confession hung in the air, fragile. "My father. He drinks to forget he's a coward. I work to forget I'm terrified. What if we fail, Silas? What if the water is lost? Then we die thirsty," Silas said. "But we die standing." She looked at him. For a moment, the distance between them vanished. The air charged with a static electricity that had nothing to do with storms. It would have been easy to lean in, to kiss her, to find comfort in the flesh. But they were not soft people. Softness got you killed. Alara pulled back. She wiped the razor on a towel and tossed it into the basin. "Done," she said, her voice returning to its usual brisk tone. "You look human again." "Thank you." Silas touched his smooth jaw. "Don't thank me. Just shoot straight when they come." She turned to go back to her gauges. "Alara," Silas said. She stopped at the door. "The boy," Silas said. "Leo. He's hiding something. He's been quiet. Too quiet. He's growing up, Silas." "Secrets are the first sign of manhood. Or the first sign of rot," Silas muttered. A thud from the front porch silenced them both. It wasn't the wind. It was the heavy, deliberate tread of a boot. Silas blew out the lamp instantly. The kitchen plunged into darkness. He reached for his Colt on the table. Alara grabbed a shotgun from the wall rack. They moved to the window, peering through the cracks in the shutters. In the yard, bathed in the starlight, stood a single horse. And on the porch, illuminated by the glow of a cigar, stood Harlan Graves. He wasn't armed for war. He was alone. "He's here," Silas whispered. "Stay inside." "No." Alara cocked the shotgun. "This is my land." They walked out onto the porch together. Silas took the right, hand on his gun. Alara took the left, shotgun leveled at Graves' chest. Harlan Graves stood at the bottom of the steps. He looked impeccable, dust seemingly refusing to cling to his suit. He took a long drag from his cigar, the ember glowing red like a demon's eye. "Evening," Graves said pleasantly. "I see you've done some renovations." "Trenches?" "Very great war of you, Mr. Thorne." "Get off my land," Alara said. Her voice didn't shake. "Technically, Miss Vance, the bank holds the mortgage, and I own the bank. So, in a way, I'm just visiting my investment." Graves walked up one step. Silas drew his gun. Click. That's close enough, Silas said. Graves stopped. He smiled, raising his hands in a mock surrender. Peace, peace. I didn't come to fight. Not tonight. The night is for truth. The day is for business. We have no truth to share with you, Silas spat. Oh, I think you do. Graves' eyes shifted. He looked past Silas, toward the corner of the porch. Silas turned. Leo was standing there. He had come out of the shadows. He was wearing his nightshirt, but tucked into the waistband was the ivory-handled revolver. Leo, go inside, Silas ordered. Let him stay, Graves said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming authoritative. The boy has a right to hear this. He's the reason I'm here. Silas felt a cold knot form in his stomach. The tremor returned to his hand. Leo, listen to me. You listen. Graves barked. The pleasant facade cracked, revealing the iron beneath. You parade around here, Silas Thorne, playing the martyr, playing the savior. You took this boy in. You raised him. You let him worship the memory of a father you call a hero. Graves reached into his breast pocket. He moved slowly. He pulled out a folded, yellowed piece of paper. It looked fragile, stained with brown splotches. I went through the regimental archives, Silas. I found the after-action report, and I found the personal effects of Sergeant James Ward. They were never sent to his widow. They were kept as evidence. Graves tossed the paper. It fluttered through the air and landed at Leo's bare feet. Pick it up, Leo, Graves commanded gently. Don't, Silas whispered. His throat was closing up. Leo, don't touch it. Leo looked at Silas. He saw the fear in the older man's eyes. Not fear of death. Silas laughed at death. Fear of exposure. Leo picked up the paper. He unfolded it. It was a letter, unfinished, addressed to my dearest Martha, Leo's mother. But Leo couldn't read the words, because in the center of the page, obliterating the text, was a hole. A jagged tear where a bullet had passed through. Surrounding the hole were black specks. Powder burns. Powder burns, Graves said softly, his voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel. You know guns, Leo. You know ballistics. To leave burns like that, the muzzle has to be pressing against the target, touching the chest. Graves pointed a gloved finger at Silas. Your father wasn't killed by a rebel charge from 100 yards away. He was killed by a pistol pressed against his heart. An execution by his own lieutenant. Leo looked up. His face was pale, ghostly in the starlight. He held the paper with shaking hands. Silas, Leo asked. It was a plea. Tell me it's a lie. Silas couldn't breathe. The ghost of James Ward was no longer in his head. He was standing on the porch between them. The smell of mud and blood filled Silas's nose. I ended his pain, Silas thought. He was screaming. His guts were in his hands. He begged me. But he couldn't say that. Not to a 13-year-old boy who needed a hero. Did you shoot him? Leo asked. His voice cracked. Alara stepped forward. Leo, listen to me. War is complicated. Sometimes. Did you shoot him? Leo screamed, pulling the ivory-handled gun from his waistband. He leveled it at Silas. The barrel wavered, just like Silas's hand wavered. Silas looked at the gun. He looked at the boy he loved like a son. He could lie. He could say Graves forged it. He could say it was an accident. But he was tired. He was so tired of the wait. Silas holstered his own gun. He stood tall. He looked Leo in the eye. Yes, Silas said. The word hung in the air, heavy and final. Leo let out a sound that wasn't human. It was the sound of a structure collapsing. He stepped back, the gun still pointed at Silas's chest. Tears streamed down his face hot and fast. Why? Leo choked out. Because he asked me to, Silas said softly. Because he was in hell, Leo. And I was the only one who loved him enough to let him go. Liar, Leo screamed. You're a murderer. You killed him, and you lied to me every day for 2 years. Leo cocked the hammer of the ivory gun. Click. Do it, son, Graves whispered from the yard. Justice. An eye for an eye. He stole your father. He stole your truth. Silas didn't move. He didn't flinch. He watched Leo's finger whiten on the trigger. He saw the conflict, the rage warring with the love. Shoot me, Silas thought. It would be a kindness. Leo gritted his teeth. A vein bulged in his neck. He squeezed. Then, with a scream of pure frustration, he jerked the gun to the side and fired. Bang! The bullet struck the porch post next to Silas's head, sending splinters flying into his cheek. Leo dropped his arm. He was sobbing now, great heaving breaths that tore at his chest. "I hate you," Leo whispered. "I wish you had died instead of him." He turned and ran off the porch, past Graves, into the darkness of the yard. "Leo!" Alara shouted, starting to run after him. "Let him go," Graves said. His voice was triumphant. "He needs a father, Miss Vance, not a butcher." Graves looked at Silas one last time. A look of pure, predatory satisfaction. "You have until dawn, Thorn. Then I come back. And I won't be alone. And neither will the boy." Graves turned his horse and rode into the dark, following the sobbing boy. Silas stood on the porch. He touched the splinter in his cheek. He looked at the hole in the wood. He looked at the yellowed letter lying in the dust. He had saved the water. He had fortified the ranch. But he had lost the war. Alara walked over to him. She didn't touch him. She just stood beside him, watching the darkness swallow the boy. "He's gone," Silas said. His voice was dead. "He's alive," Alara said firmly, though her own voice trembled. "And as long as he's alive, we can save him." "No." Silas turned to go inside, walking like an old man. "You can't save someone who wants to drown." Dawn did not break. It bled. The sky over the eastern rim of the canyon turned the color of a fresh bruise, purple, swollen, and streaked with angry veins of crimson. The wind had died down, leaving behind a silence so absolute it felt like the world was holding its breath before a scream. Inside the ranch house, the air was thick with the smell of coffee and gun oil. Silas Thorne sat by the window, his Colt Peacemaker disassembled on the sill. He oiled each part with a tenderness he had never shown a human being. Spring, hammer, cylinder. The ritual calmed the tremor in his hand, if only for a moment. Alara stood by the fireplace. She wasn't holding a weapon. She was holding a wrench, tightening the nut on a pipe that ran through the floorboards and disappeared into the foundation. The pipe hissed softly, a serpent waiting to bite. "They'll come with the sun," Silas said. He didn't look up. He slid the cylinder back into the frame. "Click! Let them come," Alara whispered. She wiped a smudge of soot from her cheek. "The pressure gauges are redlining. The aquifer is screaming to get out." "And Leo?" Silas asked. The name hung in the room like smoke. Alara stopped working. She looked at the empty bunk where the boy used to sleep. "He made his choice, Silas. Or maybe we made it for him." "I should have told him," Silas murmured. "I should have told him the day I brought him here. The truth is a bullet, Alara. Once it leaves the chamber, you can't call it back. But if you keep it inside, it explodes. We don't have time for regret." Alara walked over to him. She placed a hand on his shoulder. It was heavy, grounding. "Regret is for the survivors. Right now, we're just soldiers." A crash from the back room made them both jump. Elias Vance stumbled into the kitchen. He was wearing his best suit, the cream linen one, now stained yellow with sweat and gin. He dragged a heavy trunk behind him. "Leaving Elias?" Alara asked, her voice cold. "Tactical retreat," Elias slurred. He looked terrified, his eyes darting around the room like trapped birds. "Graves doesn't want me. He wants the deed. If I leave, if I take the back trail." "There is no back trail," Silas said, standing up. He holstered his gun. "Graves has scouts on the ridge. Anyone leaving this house before he gives the order gets picked off like a coyote." Elias slumped onto the trunk, burying his face in his hands. "We're going to die. We're all going to die because you two are too stubborn to sell. We're going to die because you were too weak to live," Alara said. She walked past her father without looking at him. "Get to the cellar, old man. Hide behind the bones of the wife you betrayed. Maybe she'll protect you." Elias watched her go. He looked at Silas. "She hates me. She knows you," Silas corrected. "There's a difference." Silas walked to the front door. He opened it and stepped out onto the porch. The sun crested the ridge. The light hit the canyon floor, turning the red dust into a river of fire. And there, emerging from the heat haze like demons rising from the pit, they came. 20 riders. A cloud of dust. And at the front, riding a black stallion, was Harlan Graves. Beside him, looking small and broken on a mare that was too big for him, rode Leo. The boy was wearing a new hat. A black hat, just like Graves. The approaching army didn't charge. They didn't scream. They walked their horses with a slow, terrifying deliberation. The rhythmic clop 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 of 80 hooves echoed off the canyon walls, amplified into a thunderous drumbeat. Silas stood alone on the porch. He felt exposed, a target painted on the landscape. Graves stopped his horse 50 yards from the fence line, just outside the range of Alara's first perimeter traps. The man was a tactician. He knew the game. "Morning, Mr. Thorne," Graves called out. His voice was cheerful, pleasant, as if greeting a neighbor. "Beautiful day for a transaction." "Turn around, Graves," Silas shouted back. "There's nothing here for you but dirt." "Oh, I disagree. There's water. There's legacy." Graves gestured to the boy beside him. "And there's family." Silas looked at Leo. The boy sat rigid in the saddle. He wouldn't look at the house. He stared straight ahead, his jaw set, his hand resting on the ivory-handled revolver Graves had given him. "Leo," Silas called out. "Step away from him. This isn't your fight." Leo turned his head slowly. Under the brim of the black hat, his eyes were cold. "You made it my fight when you killed my father," Leo said. His voice carried clearly in the stillness. "Mr. Graves says a man pays his debts." "That's right." Graves patted Leo on the shoulder. "And today is collection day." Graves raised his hand. "Burn it," Graves commanded. Behind the line of riders, 5 men dismounted. They lit arrows wrapped in oil-soaked rags. They drew their bows. "Alara!" Silas screamed, diving for the cover of the water trough. Fwhip! 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 The flaming arrows arched through the sky, trailing black smoke. They slammed into the dry wood of the porch, the roof, the barn. Fire bloomed instantly. The dry timber, baked by years of desert sun, caught like kindling. "Now!" Silas yelled. Inside the house, Alara yanked the iron lever near the fireplace. Hissus! The sound was like a dragon waking up beneath the earth. The ground 50 yards out, where Graves' vanguard was advancing, erupted. But not with explosives. With steam. Alara had rigged the geothermal vents. Superheated vapor, pressurized to lethal intensity, blasted out of concealed pipes in the sand. The horses screamed. It was a terrible, high-pitched sound. The steam scalded skin and blinded eyes. Riders were thrown. Graves' formation broke instantly. "Fire!" Graves roared, fighting to control his rearing stallion. "Kill them all!" The canyon erupted in gunfire. Bullets shredded the wood of the porch. Silas popped up, firing the Winchester he had stashed behind the trough. Bang! Crick-crack! Bang! He was a machine. He didn't aim for chests. He aimed for shoulders, for legs. He dropped 2 men in 3 seconds. But there were too many of them. Graves rallied his men. "Push through. They can't steam the whole yard. Flank them." 10 riders broke off, riding hard toward the west side of the house, away from the steam vents. "They're flanking," Silas shouted. Alara appeared at the window, wielding a double-barreled shotgun. She fired both barrels, a roar of smoke, and lead that knocked a rider out of his saddle. "I need cover," Alara yelled. "The secondary valve is in the barn. If I don't open it, the pipes will burst." "Go!" Silas laid down a suppressing fire, the lever of his rifle working a blur of motion. Alara ran. She sprinted from the back door toward the burning barn. Bullets kicked up dirt around her heels. "Get the girl!" a gunman shouted. 3 of Graves' men turned their horses, charging toward Alara. She was in the open. She wouldn't make it. Silas swung his rifle, but his magazine clicked empty. Alara. Then, the back door of the house flew open. Elias Vance had spent his entire life running. He ran from responsibility. He ran from his wife's illness. He ran from his daughter's genius. He ran into the bottom of a bottle, hoping to drown the noise of his own mediocrity. Huddled in the cellar, listening to the battle above, Elias felt the familiar urge to curl into a ball and wait for the end. He looked at the bones of his wife, Isabella. The redstone marker seemed to glow in the gloom. "Coward," the bones seemed to whisper. Then, through the cellar grate, he saw it. He saw Alara running toward the barn. He saw the 3 riders closing in on her, their guns drawn. And he saw something else. He saw Leo. The boy was still sitting on his horse near Graves, amidst the chaos. Graves had grabbed the boy's bridle, using the horse and the child as a shield. Elias saw the terror in Leo's eyes. It was the same look Alara had given him 20 years ago, the day he let Graves take the first parcel of land. The look of a child realizing their father is not a god, but a failure. Something in Elias snapped. Or perhaps something finally connected. Not again, Elias whispered. He stood up. He grabbed the old buffalo rifle from the rack, a weapon he hadn't fired in a decade. It was heavy, rusted, and probably dangerous to the shooter. He kicked the cellar door open. He didn't run away from the fight. For the first time in 60 years, Elias Vance ran toward it. He burst out onto the porch, a screaming, disheveled figure in a ruined cream suit. "Hey!" Elias roared. His voice cracked, but it was loud. "Over here. Look at me, you vultures." The three riders chasing Alara turned. They saw a madman waving a rifle. Elias raised the gun. He didn't aim at the riders. He aimed at the sky and pulled the trigger. Boom! The gun kicked like a mule, knocking Elias backward. The black powder smoke was a blinding cloud. But it worked. The distraction bought Alara the 2 seconds she needed. She dove into the barn. But now Elias was exposed. "Kill the old fool," Graves commanded. Elias scrambled to his feet. He looked across the yard. He locked eyes with Harlan Graves. And then he looked at Leo. Leo was staring at him. The boy raised his ivory-handled gun, but his hand was shaking. He couldn't decide who the enemy was anymore. "Run, boy," Elias screamed at Leo. "Don't let him turn you into me." A gunman to Elias's left raised a carbine. Thud. It wasn't a loud noise. Just a wet, heavy impact. Elias Vance stopped moving. A red flower bloomed on the white linen of his chest. He looked down at it, surprised. Thud. Thud. 2 more bullets struck him. One in the stomach, one in the shoulder. Elias fell. He didn't fall gracefully. He collapsed like a puppet with cut strings, tumbling off the porch into the red dust. He lay on his back, staring up at the smoke-filled sky. He tried to breathe, but his lungs were full of fluid. He turned his head. He saw Alara peering out from the barn door. She wasn't crying. She was watching him. Elias tried to smile. He wanted to say, "I'm sorry." He wanted to say, "I was brave," just for a minute. But no words came. Only blood. Elias Vance closed his eyes. The noise of the battle faded. The running was finally over. "Dad!" The scream came from the barn. Raw. Primal. Alara didn't freeze. She didn't mourn. She channeled the grief into the iron wheel before her. "Burn in hell, Graves," she hissed. She grabbed the main pressure valve of the aquifer system, the failsafe she had built for this exact moment. It wasn't meant to vent steam. It was meant to destroy the containment. She spun the wheel. Clang, clang, clang. The ground beneath the ranch groaned. A deep, seismic rumble that shook the teeth of every man on the field. In the yard, the earth began to liquefy. The steam pipes, pushed beyond their limits, burst underground. The aquifer, pressurized by centuries of rock, exploded upward. It didn't shoot up as water. It shot up as a slurry of mud, rock, and bone fragment from the shattered crypts below. The canyon floor turned into a quagmire instantly. Graves' horse panicked as the solid ground turned to soup. The heavy animal sank to its knees, throwing Graves into the muck. "What is this?" Graves screamed, struggling to stand. The mud was like quicksand, hot, churning, and hungry. Silas saw the shift. He abandoned his cover and sprinted into the open. "Leo!" Silas roared. The mud was spreading fast, a tidal wave of red sludge swallowing the yard. Leo's horse was bogged down, thrashing. The boy was thrown clear, landing on a patch of higher ground near the well. Graves was clawing his way toward Leo. The man was covered in mud, his fine suit ruined, his face a mask of desperation. "Help me, boy," Graves shouted, reaching out a muddy hand toward Leo. "Pull me up. I'll give you anything. Gold. Land." Leo scrambled back, clutching the ivory-handled gun. He looked at Graves, slipping deeper into the mire. He looked at the body of Elias Vance, lying still on the porch. He looked at Silas, who was wading through the mud, fighting to reach him. "Leo," Graves pleaded, "I'm your only chance. Look at Thorne. He's a killer. I'm a builder." Leo stood up. His boots were heavy with mud. He raised the beautiful gun. He pointed it at Graves' face. The world seemed to stop. The steam hissed. The wounded groaned. "You're not a builder," Leo whispered. His voice was trembling, but his hand steadied. "You're just a thief." Leo didn't shoot Graves. He shifted his aim. He aimed at the wooden support beam of the well, the only thing Graves was holding onto to keep from going under. Bang! The wood splintered. The beam snapped. Graves' eyes went wide. His anchor was gone. "No!" Graves screamed. "No, please. The mud surged. It rolled over him, thick and heavy. Harlan Graves, the man who wanted to own the water, was swallowed by the earth he tried to rape. He didn't die with dignity. He died thrashing, choking on red mud, dragged down into the darkness to join the bones of the people he had disturbed. Silas reached the island of dry ground. He fell to his knees, gasping. He looked at Leo. The boy was standing over the pit where Graves had vanished. He held the gun loosely at his side. Smoke curled from the barrel. Silas reached out a hand. Leo turned. He looked at Silas. There was no joy in the boy's eyes. No relief. Only a vast, arid emptiness. Leo dropped the ivory-handled gun into the mud. It sank with a wet gloop, disappearing alongside Graves. "Don't touch me," Leo said. The aftermath of a battle is not silence. It is the sound of pain. The surviving mercenaries had fled when the ground turned against them. The ranch was a ruin. The barn was a smoking skeleton. The front porch was gone. The yard was a lake of drying mud. They'd buried Elias Vance at sunset. They couldn't put him in the crypt. It was destroyed, flooded with concrete-like mud. So they buried him on the ridge, overlooking the canyon he had both loved and feared. Ilara stood by the grave. She was covered in soot and dried mud. She looked like a statue carved from the earth itself. "He tried," Ilara said softly. "In the end, he tried." "That count for something," Silas said. He leaned on a shovel, his body aching in places he didn't know existed. "Does it?" Ilara looked at him. "It didn't save him." "It saved you," Silas said. "And it saved the boy." Ilara looked down at the valley. "Where is he?" Silas pointed toward the corral, the only structure left standing. Leo was saddling a horse. Not the mare. She was dead in the desert. A black gelding that had belonged to one of Graves' men. Silas walked down the hill. His boots felt heavy. Leo tightened the cinch. He didn't look up as Silas approached. "You can stay," Silas said. It was a weak opening, and he knew it. "We can rebuild. The water. Ilara says we can tap the pressure. Make this place green." Leo threw a saddlebag over the horse's flank. He checked the stirrups. "You lied to me," Leo said. He didn't shout. He stated it like a fact, like the sky is blue or water is wet. "I try to protect you." "No," Leo turned. His eyes were dry. "You tried to protect yourself. You didn't want to see the look in my eyes. The look I have right now." Silas flinched. The truth hit harder than any bullet. "I loved him, Leo. He was my brother. And you killed him," Leo said. "And then you made me love you. That's the part one can't forgive, Silas. You made me love the man who killed my father." Leo climbed into the saddle. He looked small on the big horse, yet somehow he looked grown. The childhood was gone, burned away in the fire and the mud. "Where will you go?" Silas asked. "West," Leo said. "California. Somewhere without ghosts. You're 13. You won't survive." Leo touched the brim of his black hat, Graves' hat. "I survived you, didn't I?" He kicked the horse. The animal trotted forward. Silas took a step, his hand reaching out instinctively. "Leo, wait." Leo didn't look back. He didn't slow down. He rode through the shattered gate, past the mud pit where Graves lay, past the trench Silas had dug. He rode toward the setting sun, a silhouette getting smaller and smaller against the burning sky. Silas watched until the dust settled, until the boy was just a memory. He felt a hand slip into his. He looked down. Ilara was there. She didn't look at him. She looked at the empty road. Her hand was rough, calloused, stained with oil. It was a real hand, a living hand. "He's gone," Silas whispered. The words tore his throat. "He's alive," Ilara said firmly. She squeezed his hand. "He's alive, Silas. You kept your promise. You kept him alive. He hates me. He's hurting. Hurt changes people. But he's breathing. Silas looked at the woman beside him. She had lost her father. She had lost her home. He had lost his son. They were standing in a graveyard of their own making. But the wind that blew through the canyon was cool. And beneath their feet, deep under the drying mud, the water still flowed. "What now?" Silas asked. Alara turned to the ruined house. She picked up a hammer from the ground. "Now," she said, her eyes reflecting the dying light of the sun. "Now we build something that doesn't burn." She walked toward the wreckage. Silas stood for a moment longer, watching the horizon where Leo had vanished. He touched the scar on his cheek. He felt the tremor in his hand. It was still there. It would always be there. But he wasn't alone. Silas Thorne picked up the shovel. He followed Alara into the ruins.